Okay, so my name is Pierce Gemma. I'm a developer evangelist here at Intuit. Hopefully many of you know me by now, but if you don't, I work on the onboarding process in getting applications onboarded and listed on apps.com so that you can take advantage of all of the marketing opportunities we have available to you. In this webinar, we're going to be mainly focusing on what it's going to take to get an app listed before QuickBooks Connect conference. But there's going to be some information outside of that. Right now, the webinar currently is 100% full, so if there's some of you who might have joined from 2 computers or anything like that, it would be really nice if you can drop one of them or share with a friend nearby, because there are people right now trying to get into the webinar and who cannot. Okay, so for our agenda in this webinar, we have 2 major sections, but a few other fun sections to talk about. We're going to cover some new API features that have come out in the past few months. We're going to talk about the QuickBooks Connect briefly. The most important thing in this entire webinar is going to be talking about the deadlines that are coming up. Then we're going to be covering some apps, workflows, and common security issues that are important for getting onboarded to apps.com. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A. So right now, everybody is muted, and when it comes to the Q&A, we'll have questions in the chat and maybe even unmute some people, depending on how that's going to work towards the end of this webinar. So feel free to ask questions during the webinar, but we will cover those towards the end. We have a couple people here who are monitoring the questions for you. And if anyone's having problems with audio or anything, feel free to chat to one of the organizers, and hopefully they can try to refresh the audio or something like that for you. Well, let's dive in. The first thing, so one of the most exciting things is we've had a ton of releases with lots of new features and API features. I'm not going to dive into the details of the API features, essentially because it'll just take way too much time. But we have a lot of information about these on the website, and I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of heads up. Some of the most exciting things are going to be the new entities that we've released, and also the new reporting APIs and endpoints. So there's a lot of exciting things that we have been doing over here at IPP, and it's all leading up to this great conference that we're going to be talking about today. So what is QuickBooks Connect Conference? Well, to understand QuickBooks Connect Conference, you really need to understand what's going on with the entire QuickBooks Online ecosystem. So we have had tremendous subscriber growth in the past few months, and it's just growing faster and faster. And on top of that, we are also growing very heavily and investing very heavily in the platform itself. And because of these 2 major pushes, QuickBooks and the QuickBooks team is pushing for the first time a very focused conference on QuickBooks Online, on the cloud, and on the ecosystem. This is going to be a very large conference, upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 attendees, all talking about small businesses and how the cloud is going to make their lives easier. So this conference is focusing on small businesses. It's focusing on content. Yes, David?
Here's it's David. Your slides aren't forwarding. It's still stuck on the first slide, just to let you know.
Oh, sorry. Let me try this again. I'm going to share my screen again. Thank you for the note. Can you guys, David, can you see the screen?
It's working for me now, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was presenting, and I have 2 computers that I am testing with, but apparently that wasn't forwarding. So I'm sharing again. Let me pop through the slides that I just went through really quickly. So we have the agenda slide, the new API features slide, the subscriber growth slide, the platform slide, and the QuickBooks Connect slide, which is where I left off. So back to covering QuickBooks Connect, the main focus for QuickBooks Connect, the attendees are going to cover a wide range of small businesses accountants, entrepreneurs, and you, the developer community. And there's going to be a lot of efforts around the developer community as well. So lots of focused sessions and hackathons for you guys to attend. I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, to go to the website to look at what valuable sessions are available for you guys. So let's talk about the most important thing that I want to cover for this webinar. If you take away nothing from this webinar other than this, then it'll be a success for us, because the deadlines are the most important thing. The deadlines are very important that you meet them, know about them, and understand why we have them. So first off, we have today, where many of you are going to be in the onboarding process for getting onto and getting your app listed onto apps.com. And the recommendation that I want you to take away first is that September 1st is the recommended date that you submit your app to start the technical review. So let me let that settle for a second. September 1st, that is about 12 business days away, not very many. You can definitely crunch through a lot of code in 12 business days, and you can even crunch through code over the weekends. But really, you want to keep that recommended deadline in mind. Now, the hard deadline we have is September 17th, which really, if you submit on September 17th, it's going to be very highly likely you won't make it at all. It's the end. Because tech review is not always a perfect day-by-day process that ends at a specific time. It depends on how complete you are with meeting all of the requirements that I'm going to be talking about later in this webinar. So if you submit by September 17th, make sure you are very comfortable and understand that you have met all the requirements and will pass all of the security reviews that we have for our tech and security review processes. So the listing deadline we have is October 1st. So your app needs to be listed by October 1st to participate in the QuickBooks Connect conference. And you're probably wondering, why is there such a big gap between October 1st and October 20th? Well, both you and us, we need to be able to print a lot of materials to get them all part of the conference. So we just need that time to be able to get the materials printed. And then, of course, we have the webinar. You'll notice my dates are slightly different, the 20th to the 23rd. I would like to see all of you, if possible, attend all of those dates, because the hackathon starts on the 20th and the webinar and the conference ends all the way up to the 23rd. So there's a lot of events that you as developers can join and attend for this conference. So I just want to let that settle for a second. The app listing deadline is October 1st. The absolute submit deadline for you to be completed on time is September 17th. And the recommendation for submission is September 1st. If for some reason you're not going to make these dates and you might be, say, a couple days late, please, please, please let me know. I have my email address at the end of the webinar for you to email me if you have questions or concerns. We are here to help you get listed, and we want to make sure that that process is as smooth as possible, because we want you guys to take advantage of all the buzz and all of the marketing and social media that's going to happen during the conference, and so we want you to be successful. So now we're going to move into our next segment where we're talking about workflows. So what do I mean by workflows? Well, part of our requirements is we have user workflows. We often refer to them as apps.com workflows. There's a good number of them, but most of them are fairly straightforward and very simple. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is the top 3 workflows that we see developers and partners misunderstanding when they are developing apps to be listed on apps.com. The first workflow is apps.com workflow 1.0. So I have a link here to the docs page, which of course you can't click right now. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing these slides on the blog at developer.intuit.com. I'm going to be sharing these slides on the blog for you to be able to download and reference later. And also, since this session will be recorded, I will put the recording up as well. So let's go through this workflow. This is probably the one that we find developers have the most confusion with, because the user starts from Intuit's page. They're starting from apps.com. They're seeing the information about your application, and they need to try it now. So in this workflow, they're going to try an application, and what they do is they click the try it now. So in this particular case, they're not going to be logged in. So they click try it now, and the first thing that happens is they are asked to log in. So this essentially handles the OpenID protocol right there as they're logging in. And again, this is still all happening on Intuit's pages. The T-Sheets in this case has not seen the user yet. Then the next thing that's going to happen is the OAuth authorization. Essentially, it's authorizing the application to connect to the user's data. Again, the user still is not seen by T-Sheets yet. T-Sheet doesn't know about this user, but they have authorized via OpenID and authorized via OAuth. And finally, they land on T-Sheets' website. And T-Sheets needs to know and detect that all this has happened. So how do they do that? Well, what happens on the back end? Well, the key here is this flow is very important to remember high level right here. But the way this all works, the way that T-Sheets can detect that the OAuth has happened, that the OpenID has happened, is when they land on the T-Sheets page, they call the Direct Connect to Intuit method. So Direct Connect to Intuit, which again I've linked to the documentation right here for you guys to refer to later. The Direct Connect to Intuit is a JavaScript method and a library that we make available to you to include, and you can learn all about that by clicking this link. So you have the Direct Connect to Intuit call, which pulls in the OAuth tokens, and your app will support OpenID in a separate workflow. So they'll automatically detect that the user's logged in via OpenID. They land, call Direct Connect to Intuit, and grab the OAuth tokens. So they have both access. The user is already logged in, and the user is already connected to the QuickBooks data, or your app is already logged in, and your app is already connected to the QuickBooks data. And so the final thing that you're probably thinking is, well, how do we know to call the Direct Connect to Intuit when the first time we see them is when they land on the site? Well, as part of the configuration on the developer portal is we have the OpenID URL, which my recommendation and other people on the team's recommendation is to simply have a query string parameter. In this case, I have direct connect equals y. You can do it any way that you want to, but you have this URL parameter that essentially says they've just come from the apps.com. They've gone through their workflow 1.0, and we need to call the direct connect to Intuit. So that once high level, it really is quite simple to set up, but making sure you understand that workflow and execute on it precisely as it's described is what makes the user experience the best type of user experience. Because in this case, the user clicked try, they clicked authorize, and they're using your app immediately. And that's what makes this use case very powerful and very important to support. So let me talk about one last thing about this use case. So when you're building this use case, of course, you're going to want to be able to test it. So there's a special way to test this, and I'm just going to show you directly the URL. There's something to take into consideration. So this URL is essentially mimicking, when you're testing this URL essentially mimics someone clicking the try by link inside of apps.com. But there's something to take into consideration. Your application inside the developer portal has a development version and a production version. So let me let that settle for a second. So you have development tokens in your development version of an app, and you have production tokens, and you have a development app ID, and you have a production app ID. So there are essentially two instances of your app, but one's a development version and one is the production version. And so when you're testing, and as I've highlighted in red, the ID is, your app ID is at the end. So you need to pay attention and make sure that you are using the proper tokens with the proper ID. And the way you grab the ID is when you're looking at the development tab or the production tab, is you can see the app ID in the top of the configurations page. So now we're going to move on to the next workflow. So we have, in our next most common confusing workflow is when developing, is the sign-in with Intuit Workflow 1 and 2. So essentially these workflows are the same, but the major difference is, are they a new user or an existing user? And I'll let you handle those workflow differences on your end. But in this case, let me walk through the major overarching workflow. It's pretty simple. So one of our requirements is to have a sign-in with Intuit button. And this, again, is part of the OpenID system that we utilize to allow users to jump onto your app and to jump back to QuickBooks to be able to essentially jump in between all of their small business applications. So on your website during the login, so they are in this case, they are on your website. They're going to click the Sign In with Intuit button and be prompted to sign in. So they could already be signed in or not, but in this case, we're going to ask them to sign in. And then what happens next? Nothing. Nothing happens next. They simply land on your application in an already signed in state. That's important. That's one of the key things to remember. They just land on your site in an already signed in state. In this case, they are currently not, I'm going to say that, emphasize that one, they are not connected to QuickBooks. They have not gone through the OAuth flow yet. They don't necessarily have to. They can use your app without connecting their application to QuickBooks, or at least start using it and maybe connect later. It's all part of the workflow to enable the user to utilize your app very quickly and easily. So let me cover some do's and don'ts. First off, like I mentioned, is do not start the OAuth process without asking first. So for example, some reporting applications, they will essentially not be able to function without connecting to some data source. And so they will prompt the user when the user is not connected to QuickBooks data and say, hey, you need to connect this for the application to work. And that's fine. But do not do it automatically, because that will confuse the user. The users have a standard understanding of how these flows work. And so it's important to continue to follow those existing flows that we've established. So do show the sign in with Intuit button on all sign-in pages. That's simply one of our requirements. If you don't want to confuse the user who's used to signing in with Intuit and not have a button on one of the sign-in pages. In this case, do not call the direct connect to Intuit. The direct connect to Intuit only covers the use case where they come from apps.com, the try it now button for the first time. So in this case, you're not calling that. And lastly, as I mentioned before, handle new versus existing users. So in many cases, the user will land on your site, and you might want to ask them, hey, do you already have an account with us? So for example, since we're following along with our T-Sheets example, what T-Sheets does for a new user, it's the first time they've logged in with Intuit's OpenID, is they'll say, hey, should we complete your account by creating an account with T-Sheets, or should we link to an existing T-Sheets account? And that's a good best practice depending on how your application is set up. So I'm getting some reports that some people are only seeing slide 1 still. I'm going to pause my screen share, and I'm going to share it again. Please feel free to pop in questions again to alert the team if you're not seeing the slides. So I'm going to pause again and then share again, and just pop into the question session or a chat session and say if you guys are seeing this slide. It says apps.com workflows at the top. Okay, so it looks like some people are saying yes. So thank you for that. Technology always seems to be a benefit and always seems to get in the way sometimes, doesn't it? Okay, so that completes the sign-in workflow. And remember, this is a signing in from your website. This is not, they did not come from QuickBooks. They did not come from apps.com. So this is completing, that's the second workflow. Now we're going to move on to the third major workflow. This one is probably the easiest and most beneficial to you guys, that a lot of people, to be honest, I know of few to no applications that take advantage of this unique opportunity that we present. So out of every platform, and I've researched a good 50 of them, I have never seen a platform that does this like we do it for you guys. So I want you guys to really know about how valuable this can be and to take advantage of it, because it requires very minimal development and it's really easy, really quick win for you guys. So as most platforms you have experienced, there's going to be a way to disconnect the data connection between QuickBooks and your application via the platform itself. So on our App Center, the user can go in and say, hey, I want to disconnect this application. So what happens is they click the disconnect button. We prompt them again, hey, are you sure you want to do this? They click yes, and then we confirm that it's done. Yet one of our unique attributes that we provide is this next button. So it's different than what a lot of platforms do, but our next button lands on your site and gives you the opportunity to win back this disconnected user. So what should you do? Well, of course, what you need to do is try to win them back. Give them a phone number to call, give them an email address, offer them a special discounted price, whatever it might be, because every app is going to have disconnects, and you want to do whatever you can to win them back. So how do you set this up? Well, again, we're going back to our configuration page. We have the disconnect landing URL. Simply have a disconnect landing page to prompt the user when they're done. And again, this is also one of our requirements to at least have some sort of notification, but we highly encourage that you take advantage of this opportunity to try to win the user back.
This should allow them to let their
And the final piece, which is nice from a technical backend standpoint, it also allows you and your app to detect when a user has prompted the disconnect, so that you can take that into account for your reporting or however you might handle that situation. So that covers the last major workflow. And the side thing that I added in last minute, which technically really isn't a workflow, but I'm covering it under the same section, is the Reconnect token renewal. This is something that it's sad when the script breaks or a developer forgot about it or didn't set it up. So we ask that this is a requirement that you do this, but there's no way for us to test it. So there's no way for us to know if you've done this. And this is really just good for your user base. Essentially, the OAuth tokens, the authorization that happens that allows you to get access to a user's data, it expires every 180 days after it was renewed. So you must renew it within the last 30 days of the token when the token's going to expire. Again, I've linked to the documentation here like I've done in previous slides that you can refer to later when I post these up on the blog. But it's important to remember that this is pretty simple. You have a database that has the OAuth tokens. You build a script that says, here's the OAuth token, here's when it was last registered or renewed. You do some simple math that says, is it about to expire in 30 days? If so, call the Reconnect method. And this all happens on the back end. The user does not need to see this, and you just refresh the token itself. It's very embarrassing for applications when they start getting emails over several days wondering why their users can't get access to the data, and then the users have to work with each user one at a time to prompt them to reauthorize their data. So highly recommend you make sure you just have this set up. It doesn't have to be set up day one. It should be, but you definitely want to be able to do it before the tokens expire. Okay, those are our major workflows. Again, the links in there cover all the workflows that you'll need to review, but those are the major ones that we see developers missing on a regular basis. And now I'm going to move into the next segment, which is security. What are our most common security issues. So during the technical review, we will submit you to our partner agency called Cigital, and they will do a security review for your application. This happens over several days, that they run a script and a bot that scans your website. But what we've done is we've compiled the most common ones, and just want to give you guys a heads up. If you're not doing this already, we will stop you from being listed from apps.com if any high or medium security issues pop up. If any high or medium security issues pop up, or sorry, let me clarify. So if any high or medium security issues pop up, we will have to go through a remediation period, and we will not list you until those security issues are resolved. So again, the security review happens after the technical review is completed, so after you pass all the workflows I've mentioned previously, and then you need to make sure you pass security, and then you'll be one final step closer to being listed on apps.com. It sounds like a lot, but really it's not that bad. So what do we have first? Boom. Brute force login. Okay, we need to make sure that you guys have some methodology in place to prevent this from happening. So I believe most of you already know this, but in case some of you don't, bots and hackers will have computers out there that simply try password after password after password to log into websites so that they guess it. It's bad, but it happens. And so we recommend, or the solution is to have lockout time periods. If they try 3 times, then they have to wait 15 minutes until they can try again. Those sorts of things will stop brute force attacks. Next, unencrypted login request. So this one's high because it happens, but really it usually happens on, say, some side web page that people forgot about. But essentially, it's when you allow a login to happen, but in an unencrypted state. So really, just double check, make sure all of the pages where people can possibly log in, those are encrypted. SQL injection. This is kind of sad, since I remember learning about this, I think in like 201 of my college career, about SQL injection. But really, it's what happens, for those of you who may not know, is there's a form such as, hey, fill in your name here and we'll email you later, where they can inject code that will delete your tables, print emails, print passwords, print all this sort of stuff to the screen, and it's really bad for hackers. So this is unfortunately one of our top security issues. For those of you who might know about this, this is a little XKCD cartoon, which I'll give you the opportunity to read because it's absolutely hilarious. I showed my girlfriend this last night, and she actually, correction, my fiance, sorry, she slapped me across the face if I keep calling her girlfriend. Showed this to her last night, and she had no idea what it meant. But really, it's important to make sure that you clean any forms to prevent SQL injection. Medium risk, so we're moving into the medium risk section. So again, these will still prevent you from being listed on apps.com until they are fixed, but one of our top ones is simply weak password policy. You need to have some sort of robust password policy in place that checks for simple passwords, don't allow them to type the word password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ask for things like upper and lower case, and have a minimum number of characters. This one, I actually learned a lot while putting these decks together, putting these slides together about security, because even some of these I didn't know, which is why it's interesting to cover. And this is one of the ones that I didn't know. So when you're setting a cookie, you need to make sure that you set the cookie and have it have a secure, there's an attribute that you can set called a secure attribute. And essentially this means the cookie cannot be accessed unless the website is currently in a secure state. So if you don't set the secure tag, or you don't set the secure attribute for a cookie, and you set it in a secure state, then when the user is in an unsecure state, that cookie can still be accessed, essentially transferring the cookie over plain text, potentially exposing private information. So always make sure that you set secure attribute for cookies that you're setting on the website. Well, especially when you're in a secure state. You know, I don't know if this is true or not, but a side note is I read an article that Google might be giving higher priority to websites that are higher search priority to websites that are simply 100% HTTPS. You might want to look that one up. I'm not sure how true it is, but I think that's an interesting little tidbit to know about if it is something that they're doing. This is another interesting one. So a query parameter in an SSL request. So I'm going to read it word for word because it's a little technical here. So a request which was sent over SSL contains parameters that were transmitted in the query part of the HTTP request. So what does that mean? Well, there's two ways, as a lot of the developers know, there's two ways to send requests along. It's a GET or POST requests. And in a GET request, that means it's part of the URL itself. Kind of like you saw I did earlier in the presentation, how I said direct connect equals Y. That's a query parameter that is in the URL. So that is insecure. I had to look this one up to understand why this was insecure, because they're sending it over HTTP, over secure encrypted connection. Why is that insecure? Well, it turns out that what happens is those URLs are stored in the browser history. So say the user visits your site, you're very secure, all of the stuff is transmitted securely, but you pass a social security number for simplicity, which is bad, don't do that, but pass a social security number in the query parameter. Then later they go to a bad website, they get some sort of virus that scans their browser history. Oh, guess what? The browser history saved that query parameter, and they now have access to the social security number, or probably more likely something like an email address or something like that. So whatever you do, don't send, and I didn't know about this one either, don't send query parameter information in a GET request. You want to use a HTTP POST request. Okay, so that covers our major workflows, that covers our major security issues, that covers all the deadlines we have. Now we're going to be moving to our Q&A portion of this. So I've had a couple people monitoring the Q&A section. So feel free to start typing your questions, and I'm going to allow the other organizers to unmute themselves and to ask/answer questions, or ask them directly to me as well. So let's see what the other organizers have for us.
Hey, Pierce, I'll jump in. This is David. The majority of the questions so far is if this webinar is going to be available afterwards. The answer right now is yes, it'll be up on the blog site, developer.intuit.com/blog. That's probably been half of the questions that have came through so far. There's been a couple of specific questions that were kind of desktop related, and I've provided links for that. But the important thing to remember is to get on apps.com, you have to integrate with QuickBooks Online. It's not QuickBooks Desktop. We can kind of look at some of the questions.
I'm seeing a question here. I'm seeing a question. 180 days token expires in development phase, or also after published of my custom app, and it is both. Your token will expire 180 days after issued, whether it is development or production. To be honest, I'm really concerned about production, of course, because development, you should be using development accounts, and that doesn't affect the user experience. But just for development reasons, yeah, your tokens will expire. So maybe if you're using the development tokens for testing or something like that, you're going to want to cover that use case.
Hey, Pierce, there's a question about what are the benefits of being listed on apps.com before QuickBooks Connect versus waiting a month and getting listed possibly after QuickBooks Connect?
That is a great question. So let me, there's several reasons, but I'm going to cover the high-level ones. The biggest one is if you're attending the conference or you're sponsoring the conference, right now our sponsorship team is not allowing not allowing sponsors to get booths unless you're listed on apps.com or going to be. So they are reaching out to David and I on a regular basis to ensure that applications who are not listed will be listed before they accept sponsorship packages from them. The other main reason, and this is a big reason, this is probably the bigger reason, is the buzz that's going to be happening from QuickBooks Connect. So QuickBooks Connect is going to be all about QuickBooks Online. It's going to be all about platform, and it's going to be all about solving small business problems via QuickBooks Online and via the applications that you guys are developing. So there's going to be a lot of buzz. Like, we are preparing on our side for a drastic spike in subscribers and traffic from all of our sites because of this conference. So 4,000 people results in tens of thousands of tweets and posts and reviews for your applications and those sorts of things. And you really want to take advantage of that, if at all possible. So those are the two major reasons. It's a great question. Kim asks, can you send me that URL? I don't know what URL you're referring to, but I'm guessing it's developer.intuit.com. So I will...
Yeah, I pasted that into the 3 or 4 questions now, Pearson. It's also in the chat box, everyone, so it's definitely out there.
Okay, I'm going to send it to all. Hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, so if you could put that in the chat box too, again.
Okay, so I have a question here. I'm just going to read it verbatim. We plan to use QuickBooks API. Do we have to create different applications for different countries? We are in Australia and wish to create apps for US, Canada, and UK. That is a fantastic question, because I am one of your go-to people when it comes to global. I manage the global onboarding process, and the simple answer to your question is no. You only need to create one. Our V3 QuickBooks Online API supports all global countries, and there's configurations inside of your app that I want you to pay attention to when setting up your app that will allow you to select which countries your application supports. I simply recommend, in your case, because you want to support US, Canada, and UK, to just select global. That'll be the easiest way. But you can also email me, and I have my email right there to ask more questions. But to answer it for everybody else, our V3 API is by default global. The only thing that you need to do, there's 2 things that you need to do. First off, if you want to support other countries, make sure you test your app for those other countries. QuickBooks Online has different versions. It's essentially the same backend, but it's different accounts for those regions. So create an account for, say, Canada, and test your app in Canada, or talk to a accountant in Canada. Make sure you get your app tested, because you don't want to have a bad user experience for countries outside of your main country. And the other thing is, to be listed, we have apps.com, which right now is essentially US only. We have apps add-on pages in Australia, in Canada, and in the UK. And so if you want to be listed in those pages, you simply go through a QA, what we refer to as a global review, for each of those countries. It's usually a very quick process to if you have gone and tested your application for that country. So that is a great question.
So, Pierce, I was just going to jump in and address one that's probably a pretty big global one. So there's a question about the developer hackathon at QuickBooks Connect. We really are wrapping up a lot of details on that. Those should go live on the QB Connect website next Monday. They have to go through a marketing review and legal review and that type of thing. But basically, what we're looking at is a 24-hour or 48-hour, almost 48-hour straight hackathon that's going to start on Monday morning. It'll go all day Monday, all night Monday night, and most of the day on Tuesday. There'll be different categories. For example, for people that are already on apps.com, already have an existing app or an integration to QuickBooks Online, we'll have a track for you guys. We'll have a track for developers that have no integration with QuickBooks Online yet at all. We'll have a track. We're going to announce a new API that's going to be available for the first time, available to people there. So we are going to have tracks and a fit for existing developers, new developers, people that are even new to the QuickBooks world. We'll have tracks and available for them to participate in that hackathon. So stay tuned. October 25th. My bad. August 25th. On the QB Connect website, we will have more details on that, and again, we will blog about that and through our normal social channels on Twitter, etc. You should see more details on that too.
Yes, thank you. So moving on to the next question. I have one that says, is there a way to have a local app? I'm not exactly sure what that means. Do you guys?
Yeah.
What do you think
Pierce,
it means
just to
by
make it a little easier on you, I'm going to flag the ones that are red that you should jump in on. Some of those I've already answered. But yeah, you can have a local app, and you can build a private app on the QuickBooks Online REST API v3. But if you want to be on apps.com, you really have to be a SaaS app with a SaaS backend, because that's the onboarding process, et cetera, can't really happen with a local app.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the benefits of a Q&A is to answer publicly. I'm not sure how many people are reading the global chat session, so feel free to just answer globally so that everyone can hear the responses. Have you already answered this one about listing on apps.com down the road from Dan? Well, if not, I'll just give you the simple answer.
I started to type it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's yes. You can list your app on apps.com at any point in time, but the deadlines that we talked about are simply to be listed by QuickBooks Connect conference. So we have a question from David about changes and where we can see the changes. Also, what is coming before we make releases. So right now, I don't believe we have anything that is showing releases that are coming down the pipeline. There might be a couple things that we take note of, but right now we don't have a roadmap that we have opened up. To answer the other part of your question about where there are releases announcements, so there's two places. One is going to be the blog, where it's a little bit more fun and interesting to read, where we post the more important changes, like new API features. But also there's a release notes section, which you can just search for in the search bar or find inside of the more other information, I believe, section of the documentation. So there's two resources, which is the blog and the release notes. So we have this question about, do you need the OpenID sign-up process to be listed on apps.com? We're doing iPads where your sign-up button is integrated. So this is an interesting question, and the simple answer is yes. For every app, you need to support OpenID, but for mobile, essentially you're probably going to have a so essentially, what will most likely happen is you'll have a server, a website that supports your backend application, and that's where you'll have OpenID. And your mobile app will sync with your server, and your server will sync with our servers with OAuth as well. So that's sort of the way you'll handle mobile-focused applications.
Yeah, just to reiterate on that, that's where having a SaaS backend is important, because if you just have a standalone iPad app per se, the second use case a customer is going to be is hey, great, now I want to invite my accountant or my employee to that, and if it's stuck on that one iPad, it's really not going to be a great fit, right? So you really have to have a SaaS backend powering your apps behind the scenes.
Okay, next question we have is, can your security group scan servers that are running on Amazon EC2 instances? So the answer is yes. It doesn't matter where it's running. It scans public-facing website, essentially. Next, is there a vehicle in place to enable connectivity between our app, which is a desktop app, with both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop? So in the past, we put lots of efforts into having a single unified API that would do both, but technically it just was not working out. So we have deprecated the desktop API, that desktop portion, and focused on the QuickBooks Online portion. So if you want to have an application that connects to both online and desktop, then you'll have to have essentially two separate connections. One will be via the QuickBooks Desktop XML SDK, and the other will be via the QBO QuickBooks Online v3 REST API. Now let me throw out a recommendation there is I talk to a lot of developers, and I rarely find a use case where developing for desktop is worth the ROI. So if you want to have that conversation, you can email me. But really, the conversions we're seeing are spiking through the roof with QuickBooks Online, and QuickBooks Desktop is just not performing nearly as well as QuickBooks Online, and the ROI is just not there from what we've seen at this point, because as you saw, the QBO user growth is just amazing. So the other thing that's worth noting is you can connect to both for your user base, but we will only list your QBO version on apps.com for the additional marketing opportunities. David, you want to grab one?
Yeah, let me see here what makes sense to kind of...
Okay, I got one here. Our app is a cloud-based app that can be used by desktop, enterprise, and online. We are waiting for your development team to allow us to import the object for... Oh, God, this is really long. Okay, let me skim it here for a second. Okay, so essentially, Carmen is asking about having bank transfer functionality available sooner rather than later. Yes, so we definitely take feature recommendations very seriously and promote them to the team internally to push for them. But I have a feeling if it's coming in September, I doubt it's going to be able to come out sooner. And again, right now we haven't listed any promises for features that are coming down the pipeline yet because, again, we don't want to disappoint. For example, if we release in September and it comes out in December or something like that. So I'll make sure that your request is noted, but like every organization, we have resources that we need to balance to make sure we meet the biggest, most valuable needs as we possibly can. So next question: do you provide sample company test data for QuickBooks Connect test for QuickBooks Connect testing for QuickBooks Online? Can you test with different company structures? So to be honest, right now we don't have test data, but we can provide you with test accounts, and it's something that is of high demand to have some sort of sandbox environment. And I can tell you that we're working on it. Hopefully, we'll have it sooner rather than later. But if you want a test account, you can submit a support ticket, and there's different ways to load test data into that. I'll leave that sort of up to you to decide the best way to solve that problem in the near term, but I would imagine in the next few months we'll have that problem solved for you. Next question, and David, feel free to jump in anytime. Hey, in return. I have an app on QuickBooks, and with the help of Intuit App Center, I integrate with another application with my QuickBooks app. What? Sorry, I'm reading these verbatim.
Yeah, Pearson, might be easier for I'll put your name on ones that you should jump in and read, because some of them I think are very, very specific to people's apps that maybe not applicable for this webinar overall, or even applicable to QuickBooks Online. So I'll try to filter these out and bubble up ones.
I'm not sure. Oh, you're doing it in the chat? I'm not sure how to see you put names on the questions.
Yeah, you have to pull the questions out, like drag it to your desktop, and you can actually see the questions in the panels and the answers and everything.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I got it bigger now.
Yeah. So there's a couple questions related to about desktop apps using OAuth and connecting in. We do have some sample app code available for that on GitHub. I will paste a link for that. I will get a link for that out there on the chat here in the if you open up the chat panel. I've been pasting links to some of these questions. But yes, you can take desktop apps and integrate them with QBO. There's ways to get your OAuth connection for a desktop app. You just can't have a desktop app be on apps.com. So you can privately publish and connect and move data back and forth to QBO. But because it's a desktop app, you can't do a one-click sign-up from apps.com. And that's the magic from apps.com, right? And this is why it has to be SaaS, is somebody can, inside of apps.com or even inside of QuickBooks Online, they can click a button that says try now, and we can hand them to you in your app, and you can instantly start showing them value. But if you're a desktop app, we can't really do that. We can't hand them off to you without a SaaS, without you having a SaaS backend. There's a question about the conference fee for developers. My understanding is anybody that has rented a booth, those developers can attend the hackathon and the developer sessions. It's just part of your booth rental. The other ones, we're trying to get clarity. If you go to the registration page, the pricing kind of right now is, I would argue, is accountants focused. And if you say you're a developer and you click through, you'll actually get the cheaper prices. We're actually working with the conference team to make it a little clearer on the website so it's not confusing, because we know from a developer standpoint, you guys shouldn't be charged $400 to attend this conference. We want you guys to attend for as cheap as possible. And so if you click developer, then go to the next screen, you'll actually see the prices that are adjusted for developers. Apologize for the confusion on that.
Yeah, so I'm seeing the same thing. A couple questions about desktop applications. So it's really the way that the apps.com is designed, the value that it brings and the success it has is for apps that you can click the try now button and try it right then and there, and the only way that that works is with SaaS applications.
Yeah. So what you're going to see, there's a question about desktop features like multiple inventory items. So inventory will continue to be built out on QuickBooks Online. There's nothing really between now and October specifically around that, but in a way that's like a really a big feature gap, the fact that QuickBooks Online doesn't have inventory, which really leaves a lot of opportunity open to developers to build out these features and functionalities. So the reality is in the long term, QuickBooks Online will not be QuickBooks Desktop. Even if we said we wanted to do it, we added 800 features a year to QuickBooks Desktop for 20 years. It's going to be 15 years before QuickBooks Online is as deep as QuickBooks Desktop. So the real thing is this QuickBooks, it's faster for us to make QuickBooks Online easily accessible to developers and let you as developers fill those gaps. So if there's something that's missing for QuickBooks Online, it's really either another app or you as a developer would build out that functionality and those features for the small business user.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left here. I've got a couple quick questions that I can answer. One is, I'll just read it verbatim. Hey there, we got info about Intuit creating a module for QuickBooks Desktop that would sync the database with the Intuit Cloud, so developers would be able to connect via REST API. That information is outdated. That was what I was referring to about the QuickBooks Desktop REST API, which we have deprecated because it simply was not working well, technically speaking. Users were not happy with it, and the technology behind it was just simply not functioning well. The next question is QuickBooks Connect geared primarily towards developers or customers? It's geared probably equally towards both. There's going to be a lot more customers than there are developers there, we suspect, but there's going to be, because there's small businesses and accountants are going to make up the majority of the customers, but the majority of the attendees, but developers are gaining a serious benefit of being able to talk with and work with those end customers because you're building applications for them, and so there's a really strong benefit for you to be there to go to the developer track, A, B, sponsor, or C, just simply talk to and show your app to accountants and customers right during the conference. So that brings us to 10:59. David, do you want to pop in one more?
No, I think it's a matter of just, we're now down to, I think, 68 days before QuickBooks Connect. So if you are planning on renting a booth, go to the QuickBooks Connect website and click the button that says you're interested in getting a booth. That team will contact you. If you're interested in making sure your app is launched, Pierce covered some of those dates. Let Pierce and I know. My email address is david_leary@intuit.com. Pierce is there. Let us know where you're at and that you plan on trying to make that. Because as a team, we want you to cross that finish line in time for QB Connect, even if you're not attending it, because we're going to be at QB Connect doing, look at all the apps that are now on apps.com. So you want to be on those slides. You want to be part of this QuickBooks Online party, essentially, if that's what you want to think about. There's going to be 4,000 eyeballs there, right? You want to be, you want your app listed there. You don't want to 2 weeks later be launched on apps.com. Like, you want to be there at that conference from a conference that's pitching QuickBooks Online and apps.com. You want to be there. You want to hit that deadline. So let us know how we can help.
Yes, thank you everybody for attending. As you can see at the bottom of this slide, I will be sending out a survey. Please fill that out. It provides us with a lot of value to make sure that we can improve these sessions for you and provide the valuable information for you. In the next session, we're going to be covering, in about a month, we're going to be covering more information regarding QuickBooks Connect, and also we're going to be focusing on marketing opportunities, such as the best way to create an app card to drive more conversions for your application. Thanks everybody for attending, and have a great rest of the day.